Well, the key to an INFJ finally being understood or feeling understood is obviously, I want to say, enlightenment, becoming enlightened. Now, this is a word that I used in the Ecstatic Soul. It's in fact a word that has since been conceptually updated following intensively interesting exchanges with you and with people on my Patreon page, feeding into my research. I now prefer to talk about spiritualization, spiritualized INFJs, or liberated INFJs as a synonym. For those who have been following my videos relatively well over the last few months, you will know that the stage of spiritualization is a mode of life that the INFJ can attain as the synthesis of adaptive submission and solipsism, withdrawal from social reality. So the spiritualized INFJ, that's a word from my new book, The Infinite Soul, is essentially an INFJ who has mastered attunement between external reality and their NI world. So for example, if I take this place right here, right now, at this present time, I'm outside my workplace, the university in Marseille. That's very much the world of reality, what Freud calls the reality principle, something that we all have to reckon with, something that is deeply imbricated with the superego, again, to mention Freud. We can't avoid it. Now, we can also decide that we're going to heavily prioritize our NI world, the world of the archetypes, that does not have the same kind of duration, it does not have the same kind of content, it doesn't produce the same kind of fantasy activity, and most importantly, it doesn't have the same kind of temporality, right? Its temporality is extremely glacial and slow, whereas the temporality of this world right here, in addition to this world, via the reality principle being full of constraints, it's also much faster paced. So, attunement consists in, again, in the words of my latest book, overcoming severance. That is to say, the severance we experience as INFJs between the world of social reality and its demands and the NI world and its own kind of temporality. Attunement is often achieved through the realization of a vision, first of all on paper, in writing, through the articulation of your mind and your whole life as a narrative that has a particular pathway, a particular development, and a particular destination. And it usually translates itself fully into some kind of life project. It's difficult to articulate it, it's difficult to achieve it, but it's the key. And the reason why this is key to feeling understood is that people are never actually going to understand your NI world, because your NI world speaks a language that cannot be understood. It's not the language of transparent reasoning, it's the language of symbolic archetypes. So when you express yourself, in fact, you know what I'll tell you? You cannot even really blame people for not understanding you, because you yourself are making a compromise with the reality principle as soon as you express yourself, because in fact, you have to express yourself with the tools of language, of linguistic symbolization, which is already very deeply imbricated with this ideal of transparent reasoning. So in a sense, the very act of formulating sentences, the very act of engaging with linguistic expression is already at some level a separation from the NI world, and it can be experienced as painful. I have a suspicion that this is also part of the reason why INFJs are often very introverted when they are. I think it's a difficulty with linguistic expression, which contrasts with the rambly nature of other INFJs, which are also in its own way a difficulty with linguistic expression and coming to grips with the non-symbolic, in the sense of Jungian symbolic, the symbol as something that is not a sign, right? The symbol as something that cannot actually be explained in transparent reasoning. The conflict between that and the demands of communication. Now, that's already a first divorce from the NI world. Now, the liberated INFJ, the spiritualized INFJ, somehow manages to not so much be understood in terms of their NI world, because again, that's untranslatable, but in a sense, the particular life project that they have articulated as a projection from their NI world can be understood, because it speaks the language of the reality principle. So it's a second-hand experience of feeling understood. You feel like your NI world is comprehensible and can be appreciated through your project, so the way you articulate it, the narrative that you weave between the UNI world and the project that you are leading, you can feel understood. It's very difficult to achieve, but that's the very notion of attunement. So there's no direct understanding of what's happening inside your subjectivity. But what can be understood is the objective expression of your subjectivity. How to achieve this is complex. It depends very much on the kind of person you are. What I'm deeply convinced of, though, is that it doesn't have to be something super complex. And that's why a lot of the time when we read about the mythologies of sages or real sages, they lead pretty simple lives. So it's a mistake to think that the enlightened or spiritual life is necessarily very complex. But you need to be able to do the sufficient soul searching and concrete thinking as well to be able to articulate that vision into a project. Now, if you want to hear more about the INFJ, my latest book talks about these topics in more depth and detail. The Infinite Soul is available at the link below. It's first link, INFJ Life in the Modern World. How to be an INFJ in the modern world, how to find meaning, purpose and value, key aspects of INFJ happiness in a world that is often hostile to us. So don't forget that if you have the book, loved it, but haven't reviewed it, I would really appreciate a review. It helps with the referencing, okay? Now, for more detail on the inside the mind of an INFJ, the consciousness of the INFJ and its existential manifestations, the deepest investigation you'll find is the Ecstatic Soul, which is obviously, as you can see by the cover, the prequel to the Infinite Soul. And don't forget as well that the lifeblood of my channel, what keeps my channel going, is my Patreon page. So if you would consider donating to my Patreon page, anywhere from $3.50 a month, that would be so helpful and I'd be so grateful. And don't forget, you can interact with me there in a kind of privileged manner. You can get access to bonus video content and make suggestions too for future videos. Okay guys, talk to you soon. Bye-bye.